It was pretty cold out. You just dress a little warmer, right? So I pulled up. 2 gentlemen were standing there that were going to fold the flag. They said, "Do you drive that here?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "Weren't you a little cold?" "Yes, but can I ask you a question? Did you stop fighting for me on the cold days?"
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. I have a special guest today, Carol Pradel. She is an advocate for veterans, as I am. We're going to talk about veteran stories, how we honor our veterans, and I think this is like the greatest way we can show our patriotism. Carol, welcome.
Thank you, Frank.
Tell us a little bit about your history. Like you and your family are like kind of legends in Naperville, correct?
I wouldn't really say legends. I mean, it's takes everyone to make the world go around. So but I've just been fortunate. I had 2 wonderful parents. My father was in the Marine Corps. Out of high school, he was going to be the head of an orphanage, but then he decided to go in the Marines instead. Then he became on the Naperville Police Department for 30 years. And then he was also the mayor of Naperville for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody has to know the Pradel name, yes?
A lot of Naperville people do, yes. Yeah. Yes.
So, and then you told me before that your passion for veterans and honoring veterans has to do a lot with your father, correct?
Well, it does, because about, I would say 25, 30 years ago, he bought a Marine Corps 48 Willie Jeep, and he was in every parade, and then he decided that it probably wasn't a good idea to drive because he's trying to wave and say hi to everyone. And he said, "I need a driver." So that was kind of our bonding, was with the Jeep. So I'd drive him in all the parades and drive him to other things.
Tell me some of the stuff you do with the Jeep. You're in parades, and what else do you do?
Okay, we're in parades, but I joined about 3 years ago with the VFW Honor Guard in Naperville, and I'll get a call and they'll say, "Hey, we have a veteran funeral tomorrow. Can you bring the Jeep?" And of course, we go out, and what we do is either we'll lead the hearse from the church, or sometimes we'll lead the hearse from the funeral home to the church and then to the cemetery.
And when you say we, it's not only you and the Jeep, correct?
Well, usually it's the Jeep and I, or a lot of times I'll have Amy come with me, as she'll ride shotgun. So like keep an eye on the flag, make sure the flag, like if it's a windy day, is still in place. But for the first time, it was probably about 3 weeks ago, a friend of mine passed away, Joel Johnson, who was in the Marine Corps, and very good friend of mine. I worked with him as a volunteer on the fire department for 20 years. And when we walked outside at the funeral home, the Jeep was there, and I was going to lead the hearse, and his wife said, "Do the wives ever ride in the Jeep?" And I said, "Why not? Absolutely, let's do it." So that was the first time that we had a family member. And then his nephew came in from Florida that was in the Marines, and he said, "Can I ride with you?" And I said, "Jump in." So he was in the back of the Jeep.
What do you think it is about the Jeep? What makes the Jeep and the flag different and special, as opposed to just a car with a flag on it or a motorcycle with a flag on it?
People see it, and it just reminds them of how many people really served our country to give us our freedom that we have today. And we'll be on our way somewhere, and people are beeping, waving, and I just think it's a different, as someone says, it's kind of like eye candy. That's how they phrased it to me one time.
You know what I love about the whole thing is that this is something your father started.
Yes.
And you're continuing it. And what an amazing tribute to your father, right?
Absolutely.
He's looking down at you, giving you the thumbs up, right?
Yeah. And that was kind of our bonding because, being on the police department and then being mayor, of course, he was so busy.
Right.
And he was so passionate about his work that part-time, mayor was supposed to be part-time, but it ended up being full-time plus. So we had to try to figure out a way, like, how can I bond with that? And what can I do with them to spend a little time with them? So the Jeep became our bonding tool.
That's so cool. Is it difficult to keep the Jeep maintained?
No, and there's a couple guys who are mechanics by trade, and they are more than willing to help at any time.
There's something going on with people who hold veterans in such high reverence, right? And it's not just veterans, it's people who served perished in battle and stuff like that. I know why it's important to me. Why is it important to you to honor them?
Well, I think it's important to me because when my dad was in the Marines, and then, of course, as we're growing up, my dad is sharing stories of why, like when Memorial Day just passed, why when that comes up, why is that so important? Why is Veterans Day important? And I think just by having that instilled in us and knowing the importance, I think that's what really stuck in my head and said, yeah, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have our freedom if it wasn't for so many people, so many men and women, and the current ones that are out there today.
Absolutely. I just talked to one of my friends. He's a little bit older than me. He's a Vietnam veteran. He was a medic in Vietnam. He said on Memorial Day, I just went in my room and I cried all day. He goes, just the things that he's been through, and he shared a few things with me. They don't typically like to talk about it, but so I look at the price that's been paid for our freedom. It's not only the people who've lost their lives, but it's the families of those people who perished. They carry the burden of our freedom through
Absolutely.
their grief and sadness. And the people who make it back, sometimes they come back and their bodies are blown apart and they live with severe handicaps and pain their whole life. They continue to pay for our freedom. And then we have the people who made it out whole that dealt with god-awful stuff, right? They have such deep, dark storms in their head that they have to manage and deal with, and they're continually paying for our freedom. And sometimes the payment is they take their own lives because they can't deal with those storms anymore. So freedom is super expensive.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm so grateful to all of them. And someone once said, I was overhearing a conversation and they said, when did you serve? And the gentleman said, I'm still serving.
Yep. I made a lot of videos about thanking veterans. I talk about exactly how I do it. In other words, I'll tell the whole story. I entered the grocery store. I saw a man with a leather vest on with all of his unit patches on. I approached him. He had a little child in the cart. I frame it out. So I'm showing them, I'm giving them instructions on how to do it in this scenario. And I've had a bunch of my friends tell me, because of your posts, I now do that. Because for some reason we have a fear to thank a stranger, shake their hand. I walk right up to them if they're wearing the hats.
Yep.
And thank you, sir, for serving our country. And if I see a license plate in the parking lot, a veteran's license plate, I leave a note on the car.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Yes.
serving our country.
Yes.
And I said, you represent the best of us. You're the reason why I'm a proud American. And sincerely a grateful citizen. I write kind of the same thing every time, and I leave it on their windshield. To me, the greatness of our country is not our government for sure, it's the people. And our veterans and those who've served, they represent the best of us. They have willing to give their life for something greater than themselves. And that's the highest thing you can do in your life. So it's super important. We're in pretty bad shape as a country,
We
right?
are.
And I look at it as every day we live, our freedoms are going away, right? Do you think that way as well?
I agree with that. Yes. We have to exercise our rights, because if we don't, they will go away, and they are going away. And that's not fair. And for those who fought for us, they fought for us for a reason, and they gave it, and some of them gave their life for us.
My friend who I told you was a Vietnam veteran, he said it sickens me. I can't believe where our country is now. And it's just the nature of man. It's greed for power and greed for wealth. And it collapses every empire. We've had a pretty good run in the United States. I think I read somewhere the average empire lasts 20 generations, which is between 200 and 250 years. We're there.
Yeah.
So I believe that what we do, you in particular, with acknowledging the veterans, thanking the veterans, doing the Jeep escorts and stuff like that, you're paying tribute to our greatest citizens. And that gives them validation, right? That's like, this is what I fought for.
Right. And I was just lucky enough that the VFW Honor Guard let me join in with them. So I'm grateful to them. A lot of the VFWs or the American Legions will do the same thing. I mean, if you have a veteran, they'll come out, honor as they should, because anyone who fought for us, we should thank them and we should honor them.
So what do people have to do then? Do they call up their local VFW hall? Or?
Yeah, you'd call up your local VFW hall. We go not just in Naperville. We do go a little bit outside Naperville, but if you're not in Naperville, you can call like you said, your local VFW or your local American Legion. Or you can even ask the funeral home and they will put you in touch with the proper person.
One of the most impactful things that ever happened to me in my life, one of my buddies was he was the leader of the Illinois Patriot Guard. He was not a veteran, but he wanted to honor veterans. He asked me if I wanted to participate in an event. And I said, what is an event? We have a 21-year-old coming home, killed in action. We're going to assemble at the airport, and we're going to escort the funeral car all the way to the funeral home. I said, I would love to. Most of these Patriot Guards are veterans, so they wear their jackets with their unit patches and their hats. And here I'm a civilian, and I'm standing inside an airplane hangar holding an American flag in rows and rows of these Patriot Guards, most of them veterans. And the hangar doors open, and this big jet was taxiing down the runway toward the hangar, and the fire trucks were shooting the hoses over the plane. And the soldier's family was there. It was his parents, it was a pregnant wife, and a little child. And that plane came in, and we were standing there in dead silence. And the door opened, and a conveyor thing came out the door, and this single flag draped casket came down. And when that casket appeared, the family started to cry. And I'm looking around, and all of these guys, these war-hardened veterans, tears were pouring out of their eyes. So they load the soldier onto the funeral car, and outside, all these Patriot Guards, a lot of them brought their motorcycles, and a lot of them brought their cars, and they mounted flags and stuff on the cars. There were Chicago. This was at Midway Airport. I should have said that. There were police cars from all over. There's Chicago police cars, state troopers, multiple different suburbs. I would say all in all, probably 100 to 150 vehicles, all with flags and stuff. So we went down 63rd Street eastbound with all these vehicles, with lights flashing and flags, and we turned right, which is southbound down Cicero Avenue, and we traveled about, I'm going to say 4 miles. Cicero Avenue is a big street. It's 3 or 4 lanes on both sides, and at every single intersection, there was either a police car or police cars or a fire truck or fire trucks. They had every intersection blocked, so there was no cross traffic, and they'll all be snapping off salutes. It was unbelievable. And then this one gets me. We go by the school, the grammar school, where this young soldier went to school, and all the kids were outside waving American flags. It was awesome. And I thought to myself, why don't we do this for everybody?
I agree.
And what an amazing thing. It's so rewarding when you thank them. They thank you for thanking them. And we don't do it to get the thanks, right?
Right. That's not what we do.
We do it for them because they deserve it. They earned it. And I'll never forget that experience. I actually did a speech on it, how moving that was. And then I had a conversation which really changed my life. And that conversation was with a Marine from World War II. He was the father of one of my friends. And we all did a fly-in to Canada fishing. And this man was sitting next to me, Mr. Allen. He had 3 amphibious landings in World War II. The last one was Iwo Jima. And Iwo Jima was a bloodbath. That was a terrible battle, one of the worst. And he told me this story about how he was in the 3rd wave with 3 landing craft storming to the beach. And the 3rd wave is when the Japanese started the counterattack. And 2 of those 3 landing craft got blown up by Japanese artillery. So he literally watched his buddies get blown apart. And when he got to the beachhead, he jumped out under heavy fire, and he said, the first thing I saw was a Marine looking at me, bobbing in the water with his legs blown off. He was looking at me to help him. And he goes, I didn't have time to help him. He didn't realize it, but he was already dead. And everything went downhill from there. This is an 80-year-old man telling me about a day in the life of him as a 19-year-old. Wow. And when he told me that story, I was like, holy crap. And we think we have bad days, right?
Right.
And then later on, I shared that story with his son in the training pit. And he goes, oh, yeah, I've heard that story a bunch of times. He goes, my dad used to come to all my basketball games, and he missed one. And when I got home, he asked me, how'd you do today, son? And I said, Dad, I had a bad day. And here's what the old Marine told his son. He said, son, your basketball team's about the size of a Marine squad. And he says, imagine if you not only didn't win the game, but at the end of the game, everybody was blown apart on the floor dead except you and one other guy. That's a bad day, and you will never know what a bad day is. And when he told me that, this is the son of the Marine, when he told me that story, it was like, that actually, you just set the bar for bad day for me. And since then, that was in the mid-90s when I heard that story, I have never said, I'm having a bad day. I've never thought it. And when my sons would say, I'm having a bad day, I would correct them and tell them that story every single time. So that's a bad day. You're looking at a guy, I don't have a bad day.
Right.
If the day's challenging, I'll say it's challenging.
Yes.
I had a lot more movements today than a normal day, but I didn't have bullets flying at me. I didn't see people get blown apart. So back to the price paid for freedom. Mr. Allen, he's passed now, but he had nightmares his whole life. And once in a while, I would ask his son, who I work with, how's your dad doing? And I remember one time he said, not good. He's having a recurring nightmare. Now, mind you, this is 50 years after the war, and he's an old man, and he's having nightmares. And he said it wasn't the nightmares about all the combat and the people that he saw killed and had to kill. He said it was, Iwo Jima had an airstrip, and after the invasion of the Marines, they thought they had the island secured. So they started flying in aircraft, fighter planes and bombers and stuff because they thought the island was secure. Well, one night, a Japanese patrol went through the airfield and all the young pilots in tents, and they massacred him. And he was part of the cleanup detail, and that's what he was having the nightmares about. Like they just slaughtered all of these young pilots that were sleeping in their tents in the airstrip. I think it's important for us as a citizenry to never forget that stuff. And I think that's our mission, right? Never
Exactly.
forget.
Yeah. And that is my mission because, a lot of people will say, did you serve? And I said, no, I didn't. But this is the only way I know how to give back is by doing what I do. Someone also, I went one time and it was pretty cold out, I'll admit, but you just dress a little warmer, right? So I pulled up and the 2 gentlemen were standing there that were going to fold the flag. And when I pulled up outside, they said, do you drive that here? And I said, yeah. And they're like, weren't you a little cold? And I said, yes, but can I ask you a question? They're like, oh, yes, ma'am. And I said, did you stop fighting for me on the cold days?
Wow.
So that was, yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, wow. That's awesome. My friend who I talked to yesterday, he made me laugh. He said, I told my wife when I die, bury me face down in the coffin because I want a head start and where I know I'm going, you know.
Yeah. And I will tell you, though, even it's been 3 years, but every time I pull into the cemetery and I see whether the VFW Honor Guard or whether I see the two gentlemen dressed in uniform, whether it's from Navy, Army, Marines, wherever, I get chills. And I mean, when the flag is folded and handed, to the spouse or the family or whoever, not a dry eye. Because everything that they went through. And the families, too. I mean, the families went through everything, too. It's not, yes, it's mainly the person that was fighting in the war, fighting for our freedom, but the families also suffer too.
Yep. I did a podcast on this very thing just by myself. I showed like license plates, what veteran license plates look like, Purple Heart license plates and what that means, and Gold Star, which is families that lost family members in combat. It's so important. This is who we are. This is our history. This is what makes us great. And, we need to stick together. I'm fearful that the youngest generations of people, they won't have that patriotic streak in them because, as we've talked about the state of the world, they're distorting our history now.
Right.
That's one way that they can collapse everything, is they kind of erase history and make us forget who we are. Nobody has the spirit like American. Nobody has a history like us.
So true. And that's another reason why we want to do it, is because if people ask questions, that's our way to share and tell them why we're doing what we're doing.
Awesome. So moving forward, I'd love to sit shotgun with you anytime.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you.
Yep. And I would, I just love to be in the presence of them. It's very moving. And do you go to the cemetery? You do go to cemeteries too sometimes?
Yes. Usually it's whether, just a couple days ago, we actually waited at the entrance of the cemetery for the hearse. But a lot of times we'll be at the funeral home and then we'll lead the hearse to either the church or the cemetery.
Wow.
Yeah. And you want to talk about, I get goosebumps just talking about it.
And people on the street, everybody, their necks are snapping watching, right? Because the Jeep's there and everything.
Yes. And a lot of them, they will either stop what they're doing. I've had a couple people salute.
Awesome.
In the parade just the other day, I was fortunate enough to take a very, a Navy, but I can tell he's very high up. He was very decorated, his uniform, most down-to-earth man. And there was probably, I would say the gentleman was maybe 90. And when we came by in the parade, that gentleman stood up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And someone once also told me, if you don't stand for the flag, you've never been handed a folded one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that hit me.
Yeah. We're on the same mission, my friend. All right, Carol. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing that with you.
I appreciate it.
We're going to keep pushing hard with awareness for our veterans, taking care of our veterans, never forgetting all those who served. It's super important. And as I said, they represent the best of us. And
I look forward to having you in the Jeep.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Warrior Podcast with Carol Pradel. She's a true patriot, and hopefully will inspire some of you to get out there and show some tribute to our most valuable citizens. Love you guys. See you at our next podcast. And remember, there's a warrior inside us all. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.